Sweet home, Santa Barbara, where the skies are so blue. Sweet home, Santa Barbara, what's worked for me can work for you.
Welcome back, friends, to Sweet Home Santa Barbara. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Robinson. I'm with my friend and realtor,
Scott Williams.
And Scott, we have another guest today who is an expert in her field. Let me just say a little bit about our guest, Kelli Ellis. Kelli is an award-winning international designer, a host, a speaker, an artist, and a best-selling author. Kelli is the SVP of Operations and Industry Relations for Ronalty, working with designers, antiques, and art dealers worldwide. Please welcome Kelli Ellis. Hi, Kelli.
Hello. Thank you.
Well, you have a lot of experience in a lot of different things. I'm looking forward to asking you some questions, but just right off the bat, I'm curious how you intersect with the world of real estate and house buyers and sellers.
Yeah, I, for many years, my specialty has been design psychology and working with stagers and everything from designers, stagers, life coaches to therapists about design psychology and understanding the whys of design, not so much how to design. So it's been a pleasure working in the real estate industry, actually. I quite enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do with people in the real estate industry? Like what might be a typical day or way you interact with them?
Understanding, as you know, the power and the influence of properly staging a property, how important that is. And depending on the property, of course. But a lot of the times I will work with stagers to help them understand how to not lose the sale for an agent. I have a really funny anecdote really quickly. My very first staging job as a designer, so I've been an interior designer for 30 years myself, over 30 years, not to age myself. And so
You started when you were 10 years old.
I did, that's right, I did. An agent hired me to stage a home. It was my first staging job, and I staged it so well, the couple didn't move. And I thought, oh, yeah, not the point, right? Because I was so engrossed and ingrained in what the couple really wanted in their next home and why they bought this home and digging deep in the design psychology, because I was at the time writing my book, that I ended up they had the home that they wanted, right? And so it was a terrible experience for the agent. Clearly, she never worked with me again. But then I also went, okay, how do we take all of this information and bottle it so that anyone can use it, including agents and the stagers, to optimize this space for potential buyers? So whether or not agents want to use a staging company or they just want to know how to do it themselves, because a lot of successful agents will do staging themselves, which is brilliant, I think. If they have the bandwidth for it, I think it's really important to understand, right, that aside from hiring stagers to come in, it would be great if you don't need them, but there's some tweaks that you can make very easily in a proper, you're getting ready to sell yourself and teaching yourself and your team. I love doing that, getting in with some of the agents and their teams and their offices and talking about the design psychology, what it is they're looking for, what buyers are looking for, and how they can do it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Scott?
Well, let's say that you're designing, I think you refer to it as designing for life. Mm-hmm. And why don't you share a little bit about what that means and, how that influences your work?
It's really interesting. So like I mentioned before, the whys of design are so important. We actually walk hand in hand with real estate agents in that we're asking very personal questions when you have a client, right? You have to get to know them on a very personal level. You have to connect with them. You want to understand whether or not you're representing the house that they currently live in, or you're helping them find another home. You have to understand their motivations, where they're coming from, what they love. great example is you're walking around a property with your clients and one says, I love it. The other one says, I hate it. And you're like, why? There's very visceral reaction, right? We have a feeling about certain properties and there's a laundry list of why one person said they loved it versus one person saying they hated it. And you have to understand those things, right? In order to show them the right properties or to effectively sell their current property. It's the same thing with designing for your life. I'm asking very personal questions. I'm helping people create spaces that they can live in through all stages and that all people within that home can live in through all stages and comfortably, right? I used to have to sell this concept until COVID. And then I didn't because we spent so much time at home and in our spaces and realized what worked and what didn't, what was comfortable, where was it comfortable and why. And many people realized, gosh, this room is terrible. I've used 10% of it in the last month. Or this is the best space ever. Everything is multifunctional. We were able to have gatherings and play games and have dinners and, whatever. So designing for life is really getting to understand the clients, what they need and why, right? So I called the 3 Fs, right? There's 3 Fs that have to be in the room in order for it to work: function, flow, and feel. And so if you don't have the functionality of the room, there's zero flow and it doesn't feel right, you're never going to use it. And then there's questions, that you have to ask. Why are we looking to redo this room? What about this space isn't working for you? How many people need to be in this space? All the same questions you would ask as an agent to say, good, how do you entertain? What are you looking for in your dining room? How big of a table do you need? You're kind of walking the line, right? Between therapist, designer, agent, and all the things to really get them what they need for their life.
That's why all your different hats can be useful, I assume.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
Well, being that, buyers are all individuals, how do you use your strategic interior design? Can you do it give some general tips as to what people might do to set up a house or fix up their house in a way that is ready for selling?
Yeah, I think, we always say edit, right? The biggest thing is this. When buyers are walking through your home, and obviously we know remove too personal items, right? The items that are too personal to the actual homeowner, because it's hard to envision my own photos there. But by the same token, people want to see that there's warmth in the house, right? Because a home brings energy. So if a house feels like it's too cold, not lived in, not loved, and that there's no energy, no good energy happened here, right? We didn't have family holidays here. This place was never used. There was no love in this home. You can feel it when you walk in. You can tell a brand new spec home versus a home that's been lived in. You can tell, and people know that when they walk in, that they go, oh, that's really great. So I don't think that stripping away all personal facts, that artifacts is important. I don't think. I think it's really important that we understand that buyers are coming through using all 5 of their senses. And that the number one thing we can do is create space, right? There's that flow, right? That you can see the function of the room, but also other functions, potential functions of the room. And that the feel is nice. And that's what you were talking about, or where we talk about color, right? When we start bringing in color, how does it feel? Is it shocking? Is it calming? Is it jarring? Is it relaxing? And all of those things. But what is happening, what I see most often is if I am ever able to walk through a space with a potential buyer, the first thing I want to tell the agent, and I do tell the agent in the nicest way possible, is please just listen and don't talk. Do not oversell a space, because the exact moment the client is walking through a space, right? It could be your home. You're listening to these people walk through the space and they're walking through your home. And you're just, if you happen to be there, that's what we tell most of the sellers not to be there, right? Don't be there because they don't want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly. But as an agent, even, if you're listening more than you're talking, you are not getting in the way of that buyer making a potential memory about the space, right? So when clients are walking through the space. They're using all five senses to create an impact, to create a feeling, and then a memory about the space. So if I said, oh, I love it, and then I start telling you why I love it, please don't interrupt me, agent, to tell me what I could be doing with this space, or how wonderful this is, or how beautiful XYZ is, or imagine blah, blah, blah. No, like, let me imagine what I would do in this space. You never know, right? I'm sure you've been shocked at some of the things or some of the ideas people have. And then you just go, oh, okay. These are the people that I actually need to just zip it and let them come up with the ideas for these spaces, right? Where you're thinking, this is the worst place for a home theater, but all right, I would never put the yoga studio here, but you're right. At dining room here, weird, but you're gonna let them create their own ideas. And it's the same thing when you're staging your normal cell. I don't believe in stripping it down and not having personal effects. I do believe in creating emotional space and mental space for the buyer to actually create their own memories. So it just needs to flow. It needs to feel good. It needs to not, we're not tripping over things. There's not stacks and piles of junk. There's none of those things. But there's also the ability, the mental space for the buyer to actually go through and formulate their own opinions, right? And then we can talk about, there are some tried and true things to do, but, like making sure there's enough light, making sure there's a mixture of textures, making sure that there's a good airflow, the room smells good, right? All five senses. So you go through all five senses to make sure all the things are there. And I love talking about staging, but I'm sure you guys have heard so much about staging. But the next most important thing is that what happens mentally is really the key.
This in some ways goes against the staging by, these are all the things you need to do that are very ordered, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do all these things. You're trying to introduce some, choices and maybe a bigger palette than just the regular 5 ways you do it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like if you have an empty house, right, and you see the staging company come in and they're dictating where everything goes, it's just as annoying when you have an empty house and you're being dictated to, well, the nightstands have to go here because this is the only place that we have plugs, and it's that same kind of thing where you don't get to use your imagination in the space if you rein it into too much. Now, obviously, if you've got a sitting room, you're going to show how you can put some furniture in the space. You're not going to overwhelm it. It's going to be a good balance with a little bit of green plants to show life. You're going to have good smells in the space. You're going to have a mixture of textures. Like you said, the hard and fast rules. But sometimes you got to mix it up because trends do matter here. The buyers are going on trends. And we're also coming off, like I said, COVID. And we're coming off of a time where we spent a lot of hours in our home, and some of us still work at home. I do. So now I know that I need a separate office, right? And so you might think about dedicating one of those bedrooms and making it an office instead of filling up all those spaces and going, this is a 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom house. No, it's a 5-bedroom with a flex room, right? So this room could be a yoga room. This can be a retreat. Like, we don't want to dictate too much about the uses of the space because so many people are doing so much more in their homes than they ever were.
Mm-hmm. What are a couple of the trends that you've seen lately in terms of design?
It's really funny. Trends come and go, and they are that. But my favorite is the emphasis of biophilic design. So back in probably the 50s, 60s, you used to see homes that would have almost like a terrarium or inside the gardens. Do you remember the like beautiful mid-century, you've got these gorgeous homes, and they always brought the inside out and outside in with big windows, and there was always a view to green, or there was the ability to put plants inside the house. And we're seeing a huge return to that. Understanding the power of plants, the power of nature, and wellness as a buzzword. Now that we're seeing that being put back into the space, California room was always a thing, right? Or your loggia was always great. That's always, yes, we want outdoor living space. Now we're bringing the outside in and not new ways, but we're kind of going back to some of those smatterings of the 1950s and 60s, which I think is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things that, as part of that, bringing sort of the brightness of daylight, sunniness to rooms. And I suppose that can be done with color. Do you have any ideas or suggestions about doing that if you can't just do it with a window?
Adding color to your space. We mentioned that. So how do you do that without just... rephrase the question. Sorry. Well,
this is coming out of a thought that we talked a little bit about, the whole idea of chromophobia, or being scared of color. That's part of what staging has led us to, is great neutralnesses of houses, or neutralizing houses. And the opposite, I found myself, I went entirely down that road. So I end up with a chromophobia. I'm scared of like using lots of vibrance or lots of colors. And what's your comment on that?
It's really interesting because of the wellness trend. We did see a very big return to clean walls, simple colors, don't scare people. If you have a truly feng shui house, you're going to have a red room, by the way. Like, there's some craziness out there, right? I don't need to tell you that I don't love feng shui. I just, because if you really apply the principles, they don't work for everybody. Just like that blandness doesn't work for everybody, but there are colors that you can use always that we have scientifically determined actually spark creativity. The blues and the teal greens are safe everywhere. So if you're like, okay, I would like to toe step into using some colors to show a little bit more, to make people feel comfortable, creative, and calm, your greens, your sages, and your teals are a way to do that. And they're not scary, right? Those are really calming colors. And if you ever want to know what the trends are, just walk through model homes. That's what my advice has been forever and ever and ever, is that most of the model homes are going to be cutting edge because they're appealing to a broad range of buyers, right? So they're trying to get that little bit of an edge, and so that we are cutting edge. We know the trends. We know what's going to appeal to everybody. And so when you do, you get the beiges and the grays and the, your gray beige, you get your white walls. But the color, if you ever see it, is going to be very neutral, very wellness based. Think about walking into a spa. Those are the colors that you can use without fear. Obviously, the hot reds, like my lipstick, or colors from In-N-Out or In-N-Out burgers, those are reds and oranges. Those are energy colors. You're never going to see those on the walls. It's never a good idea. Everybody knows that because it doesn't feel good. It feels like a kick to the stomach. When you walk into the space, it's jarring. So as we said before, when people are creating their memories about a space, you want them to feel good. And you need colors around them to feel good. If there's hot pinks and it's like little girl's room, that's appropriate. If there are, there's memorabilia in certain rooms because it has a theme, that's appropriate. But there are things that it can be very polarizing, right? So if you walk into a game room and, you've got a kid who's addicted to gaming, this house is not going to feel good to you. All you're going to remember is that stupid game room and how terrible you felt in it. And you remember that your kid's addicted to gaming and I don't like that place because it just is bad juju, right? And that is not even a rational thought. It had all the bedrooms they wanted, and had all the bathrooms they wanted, and had everything that they wanted on their list. But for some reason, they don't like this house. And that's because some people can't see past the decor. That's why we've gone to that, right? Chromophobia as color, right? So there is a chromophobia. So you can add color, but you just need to do it in a very careful way, right? In a very careful way. So I don't believe in everything being neutral. It actually does the opposite. It actually ends up looking almost like a padded salad, right? When you go all white or all neutral and there's nothing in it, there's no life, that's when we're going to have a problem. You need to bring in the woods. You need to bring in a balance. I know you've toured homes where you're thinking, wow, this is dark. And all they needed to do was add some natural elements, AKA marbles, woods, right? And give you some earthiness back in there. Add some plants, those are the things that I love to tell agents about. Going, look, how does it feel to you? What was your first reaction? And it's generally right, because you guys are seeing more properties than anybody. You're the one who's getting the feeling, and what your gut says is probably 90% correct about the color and the feeling of space.
Well, a lot of great information, Kelli. I'm wondering if you have any final comments that might be useful for all our listeners in terms of the design and what you do.
Yeah, I think the benefit of understanding the emotion that people are having when they're walking through a space is doubly as important as the way the space looks, right? So allowing your buyers and sellers to create their own emotions and memory of a space is just as powerful as good design. So listening more, talking less.
I'm glad you said that, because I agree that that's a really important thing that's underrated and not talked about a lot. A lot of great information, Kelli, and we really appreciate it. How can people get a hold of you?
Yes, please reach out. You can find me on Instagram at Designer Kelli Ellis, where I'm always giving design psychology tips and sharing my life here in Barcelona and beautiful properties around the world, as well as my design projects. And then I'm really happy to talk to people. If there's specific questions, they can reach me at kelliellis.com.
And Scott, how can people get a hold of you?
Scott at scottwilliams.com.
And we thank our listeners for another great episode of Sweet Home Santa Barbara. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite app. If you know someone preparing to sell their home, please tell them about the podcast. Visit scottwilliams.com to contact me and download the 2 free e-booklets, Is My House Saleable Now? And How Not to Buy a Money Pit. Thank you for listening.